Contrary to what you might think, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX actually had a fantastic fourth season, but it was never regionalized for the English audience. There are probably a few reasons for this, like the mature themes for the season, waning popularity of the GX anime in the English-speaking territories, or most likely, unwillingness to compete with the upcoming 5D's anime series. Regardless, not regionalizing the fourth season leaves the Western audience with a cliffhanger where Jaden never returns to the Duel Academy. I find this doubly interesting, because it appears that the events that lead to the World of Darkness arc are already set in motion whether Jaden returns or not, which poses the question for the video. What if Jaden dies at the end of Season 3? Really quick, I'm going to go through an abridged description of the plot as it occurs with Jaden present, noting times where the events would be largely unchanged by his absence. I would recommend watching the series ahead of time if you haven't already, just to avoid spoilers of what I think is the best season of GX by a substantial margin. So, 3, 2, 1, spoilers. The first two important events in the plot are that the holographic function of the duel discs is not working with certain cards, and that a mysterious figure named Fujiwara returns. Fujiwara addresses other characters as an old friend, and there are some mind trick shenanigans to help him reintegrate into the academy. Fujiwara sees a dark aura around the defective cards and attempts to burn them, with some degree of success. From the smoldering cards emerge a dark-clothed figure, which then duels Jaden and promptly loses. Fujiwara then goes to the abandoned dorm from the Light of Destruction arc, which causes Atticus to regain memories from that time, specifically those of Fujiwara summoning the power of darkness with a blood sacrifice. Atticus then picks up Night Shroud's mask card, reflecting upon it. At the same time, Jaden is confronted by Sartorius and Kagemaru. The two inform Jaden that the combination of the revival of the sacred beasts, the attack by the Light of Destruction, and Yubel's trans-dimensional rampage has led to pressure building, which will soon be released. As a quick aside, since those three events have already happened in previous seasons, this is why I think the World of Darkness event would occur whether or not Jaden was present. Jaden is then confronted by the mysterious dark figure from earlier, who names himself Truman, or Mr. T for short. It really is a pity that the fools at 4Kids never regionalized this season. Regardless, the two duel and Jaden wins again. Axel discovers that Fujiwara was a student at the abandoned dorm, and as a result, both Axel and Atticus journey to the abandoned dorm. It is revealed that Fujiwara was a student at the same time as Atticus and Zane, and was of comparable strength as a duelist, and that Fujiwara was the only student not to return after the termination of the Sacred Beast experiments. Jaden and Atticus, having now donned the Night Shroud mask, then duel. Atticus is aware that during the process, he may either unlock repressed memories from the abandoned dorm, or again, be possessed by Night Shroud. Fujiwara is revealed to be the dual spirit Honest. This is partially due to Jaden's influence, and the incursion of the World of Darkness is finally revealed. Truman again confronts Jaden, where Truman is defeated. Episode 161 and 162 are about a tag team tournament, and can be considered largely superfluous. Even in the shortest season, there's still filler in GX. Jaden is Alexis's partner, and although Jaden is not a team player in the first few rounds, eventually cooperates with Alexis in the final match against Hasselberry and Blair. If Jaden were absent, the tournament would still continue, and there would probably be more interesting pairings overall. But how it stands now, there is a bittersweet moment for Jaden and Alexis shippers, as the couple is teased but never cemented. Episode 163 and 164 are Cyrus Spotlight episodes, specifically focusing on Zane passing the torch. Zane is challenged by a disciple of the Genzo Art School, but when he is unable to complete the duel, entrusts his deck to Cyrus. Cyrus then duels the Genzo Art disciple with a Chimera deck forged from his brother's Cyberdark cards, as well as his own roids. Cyrus becomes the representative of the Cyber Art Dojo, and eventually defeats his opponent. Jaden's role in these episodes is super minor, outside of a nice callback to the filler episode with the Golden Egg Witch. Jaden's greatest contribution is telling Cyrus to ask the deck what it wants, as well as pushing Zane's wheelchair. Jaden's role could easily be replaced by a staff member of the academy or another student. Maybe with Chaz, since he can talk to dual spirits as well. Speaking of Chaz, episode 165 and 166 are spotlights on Chaz, focusing on his introduction to the professional circuit. Chaz becomes a personal assistant to Aster and has to do seemingly mundane tasks that ultimately turn out to be training, similar to those under Master Miyagi. Aster can't participate in a duel, so Chaz subs in, wearing an Ojama suit. The Japanese name for Chaz is Manjome, so this new persona is called Ojamanjome. Just wanted to point that out. I use the English names for the most part because I am most familiar with them, but this point of trivia is just so funny I had to point it out. The ultimate D card is stolen, so Chaz gets pressured into taking a dive against Jaden, forcing Aster to retire. Then, in the next episode, Ojamanjome returns, but is pressured to play poorly with the ultimate D card as leverage against him. Jaden retrieves the card, and Chaz is then able to duel at full strength against Aster, ultimately defeating him. Again, Jaden has a pretty minor role in these spotlight episodes, and I think another character could be substituted without major problems or plot holes being introduced. Not sure who would work best though. Episode 167 relies entirely on Jaden, but I think it could be removed entirely or just replaced with a cliff show if it's necessary for pacing. Jaden duels Crowler in order to ensure that he will graduate. This episode is a nice callback to the first duel against Crowler, but is sort of filler again. In episode 168, the World of Darkness begins assimilating students, with Tsutomu being converted to attain power in the World of Darkness. All of Domino City's residents have been disappeared. Axel confronts Tsutomu, which ends up being a trap laid by Truman. This is the B-plot of the episode, which is pretty much independent of the A-plot, where Jaden must duel other students in order to get enough points to graduate. Eventually, Jaden does get a call to action from Serrano, which leads him to Domino City, but I think this could be trimmed. Axel's duel against Truman in episode 169 is pretty cool, and I think I'm going to have to do a whole video on the World of Darkness, because GX presents some pretty heavy themes and ethical questions you might not expect in a card game anime. Axel falls into the World of Darkness. Jaden then arrives and is confronted by Axel clones. This is another good spotlight episode, with a minor appearance by Jaden. Episode 170 and 171 are a duel between Sartorius and Jaden, which would have to be completely reworked. My suggestion is to replace Jaden with another character, maybe Atticus, because he does have some history with Sartorius brainwashing his sister into the Society of Light. Episode 172 has an A and B duel structure, with matches between Hasselberry and Truman imitating Serrano, as well as Jaden dueling Truman impersonating Jesse. But wait, it's not actually Truman appearing as Jesse, but Jesse himself. Double twist. Jaden was under an illusion induced by dark influences on his polymerization card, since it was adjacent to Arcana Force Zero the Fool from the previous match. The two of them returned to Duel Academy together. Meanwhile, Hasselberry falls into the World of Darkness. I'd say cut this redundant duel between Jaden and Jesse, and replace it with another main character falling into the World of Darkness. Maybe Cyrus, because that happens off-screen between episodes. Speaking of which, episode 173 begins with Cyrus falling into the World of Darkness, later joined by Alexis, Chaz, and the few remaining Duel Academy students, except Atticus. Atticus dons the Night Shroud mask once more, and sees the torment that Cyrus, Chaz, and Alexis are now experiencing in the World of Darkness. He then duels a human incarnation of Night Shroud/Darkness, who is later unmasked to be the actual Fujiwara. Jesse and Jaden end up encouraging Atticus, and rewriting the episode, we could probably pare it down to just Jesse speaking. Sadly, the encouragement is not enough, as Fujiwara finds the darkness in Atticus's heart and exploits it to win the game in the following episode, setting the stage for the final confrontation with darkness. Episode 175 to 178 are a big 4-part final boss duel, where Jesse and Jaden are up against darkness. Jesse is defeated in episode 176, followed by Fujiwara. But this is not the end of darkness, as only a part of the concept has been defeated, and the real final boss fight begins. Of course, Jaden comes out on top, but I think the final boss fight is really where the bulk of the changes should be made. But before we get to that point, episode 179 and 180 are about resolving the series. Jaden graduates, duels Yukimoto at his peak, and then wanders off into the sunset in search of more dueling adventures. To tell the truth, I'm not sure if this duel between Yugi and Jaden is even canon, but it is a very nice bookend. Now, onto changes that I think would have to happen if Jaden were not present in the 4th season. For one thing, a couple of filler episodes like 161, 162, 167, 170, 171, and the Jaden half of 172 could be trimmed, if not completely omitted. Even in the final, shortest season of the show, there is still what is arguably filler, although labeling the slice of life and character development episodes as filler seems disingenuous. It does raise some interesting questions about story, structure, and audience expectations, and let's explore those. So, from my experience, there are extremely few instances in which the protagonist is removed from the story while the plot continues, and yet fewer instances in which this is done to the benefit of the story. This version of pulling the rug out from the audience is dangerous for audience retention, as the protagonist is often the most popular character in the show. Part of this is based on how much screen time they receive, as well as the growth that is presented in the narrative. More on that later though. In this case, I think removing Jaden would not be too far out of left field, considering that he is absent for the first few episodes of Season 4 already, and there is a very convincing in-universe reason for Jaden not returning, as he has been fused with Yubel and/or is trapped in the alternate dimension. If we keep this going, there would be a noticeable void in the cast, both in terms of characters being absent, but also in terms of the emotional contributions of the other cast members. As Jaden is the character who is always optimistic, giving the series a carefree tone for the most part. There are moments of anxiety and melancholia, even some surfacing in the 4th season we got, but for the most part, Jaden is always there to keep hope alive. This is actually part of the reason why the Supreme King arc in Season 3 is so intriguing. As a counterpoint to the audience attachment to Jaden, the series being tethered to him is oftentimes at the expense of development of secondary and tertiary characters. Did Jaden really need to be present in that Cyrus spotlight with his brother, or in Chaz's Ojama episodes? I would go as far as to say that his presence actually detracts from the other characters' growth. On the topic of character growth, I would also argue that Jaden has completed his arc when he merged with Yubel at the end of Season 3. And it's not that Season 4 is a regression in character, but it does not feel like Jaden really grows that much as a person or a duelist, although I might be getting nitpicky. In terms of how the plot actually develops in the absence of Jaden, that is a slightly different question. I think there are a couple different scenarios, with the first being darkness wins and the world is enveloped in sorrow and pain forever. This is because no one, other than Jaden and Jesse to a lesser extent, are able to resist darkness. This scenario is boring, and I don't think that the series creators would have gone for it. Scenario 2 is that darkness is defeated by the students and perhaps even the staff of Duel Academy. I like the idea of all the side characters getting more screen time, especially if they are able to complete their arcs. I think the best way to handle this would be a desperate final duel against darkness that features all the remaining main characters, with all of one but them falling to darkness. I would handle this with an inherited deck style of duel. This concept was sort of shown off when Yugi gets to play the remainder of one of Kaiba's games in the Virtual World arc, but I want to go a step further. For starters, Jaden's original deck would need to be split up among the other duelists, and at this point we sort of run into the problem deciding who is considered a main character in the series. Cyrus is an obvious choice, and I already like how his arc was handled with his brother Zane. It was a nice moment, but I think Zane is functionally retired at this point, so no cards for him. Chaz is a great choice, since he displays a lot of protagonism and is part of the original rival trio. Speaking of which, I would like to see Bastion reintroduced to the series, since he unceremoniously left the show to return to his home planet. Minor Jaden adjacent characters come to mind as well, specifically Blair, Tyranno Hasselberry, and Jim Crocodile Cook. I'm thinking these characters would function as decent fodder for Truman duels, before the final match with Darkness. Aster is also in a weird spot, as he is basically a foil to Jaden, but is not really a member of the Academy, and in Jaden's absence, seems extraneous. Alexis, the potential love interest for Jaden, is a little different, as I think her bond with her brother Atticus and the Society of Light is very significant. I also think Atticus, in particular, deserves a bit more of a presence, since he has grappled with darkness firsthand. Finally, there is Jesse, of course, who was already in the final battle. Although, I would make him the first opponent to be defeated. You know, really start with a tension spike. As far as the inherited deck idea, I would like to see each duelist add their deck to what was left by the previous duelist, using a mix of their signature cards with some of Jaden's. As the duel gets down to the final duelists, Jaden's deck has been reunited within the communal deck, and maybe at this point we have a nice flashback or even a ghostly appearance from Jaden. If you want to be really cheesy, this is the point where Jaden would actually return from the other dimension. But that sort of defeats the point of the rhetorical exercise. If you do think that Jaden would deserve a little more screen time in the final season, despite not being there, one thing I think would be cool is to have Truman take on the form of Jaden, just for the fight against Jesse, since those characters have a strong bond from the previous arc. I guess the elephant in the room for some of these what-ifs is, why does any of this matter? Usually it's just for fun, but I think this time there's a little more going on for this what-if. Like it somehow enhances the enjoyment of the original by looking at another possibility. Sometimes there's an air of speculative enjoyment, and at others, a fear of missing out on the cool things that may have transpired in another timeline. But in this case, I think the final season of GX was already fantastic. But there's still room for exploring alternatives. And that is the double-edged beauty and pain of theory crafting like this, getting a phantasmic glimpse of what might have been. I apologize for the existentialism, especially toward the end of the video, but I think this is a very interesting scenario, even if it ended up resembling a fanfiction at the end. Of course, with one of these questions, I always turn it over to the audience at the end, asking, what if Jaden died at the end of Season 3, in this case? I'm thinking about changing the follow-up format slightly when addressing comments, shifting it to a follow-up Friday video. Same content, different day. But to close off this video, I'm going to go ahead and tease the next question on my mind. That is, what if non-effect ritual monsters could be special summoned directly from the deck? I'm excited to explore that scenario in the context of the larger game, because early rituals were underpowered, and this retroactive rule change could really spice up some older formats. But we'll get to that question eventually.